Welcome to Artificial Intelligent Finances, the YouTube channel that explores the intersection of artificial intelligence and finance. Join us as we dive into the latest developments in machine learning, deep learning, and neural networks, and their applications in the world of finance. From predictive analytics to algorithmic trading, we've got you covered. Creating a ChatGPT using GPT-3 involves several steps, and it's not a simple task. Here are the general steps you need to take. Sign up for access to the GPT-3 API. To use GPT-3, you need to apply for access to the API. You can do this by going to the OpenAI website and following the instructions. Choose a programming language. GPT-3 can be used with several programming languages, including Python, JavaScript, and Ruby. Choose the language that you are most comfortable with. Choose a chatbot framework. You can use a chatbot framework like Dialogflow, BotPress, or Rasa to create your ChatGPT. Develop a conversation flow. You need to determine the conversation flow that you want your ChatGPT to have. Determine the types of questions it will ask, and the types of responses it will provide. Train your model. Once you have developed your conversation flow, you need to train your ChatGPT. This involves feeding it a large amount of data to help it learn how to respond to different queries. Test and refine. Test your ChatGPT by asking it questions and evaluating its responses. Refine it as necessary to improve its performance. Deploy your ChatGPT. Once you are satisfied with your ChatGPT's performance, you can deploy it on your website or other platform. Note that creating a ChatGPT using GPT-3 is a complex task that requires significant programming and AI expertise. It's important to carefully consider your goals and resources before embarking on this project. Here is a more detailed explanation of the steps involved in creating a ChatGPT using GPT-3. Sign up for access to the GPT-3 API. To use GPT-3, you need to apply for access to the API. Once you've been accepted, you will receive an API key that you can use to access the GPT-3 language model. Choose a programming language. GPT-3 supports several programming languages, including Python, JavaScript, Ruby, and more. You should choose the language you are most comfortable with, as this will make it easier to develop and debug your ChatGPT. Choose a chatbot framework. You can use a chatbot framework like Dialogflow, BotPress, or Rasa to create your ChatGPT. These frameworks provide a set of tools and libraries to help you build and deploy your chatbot more easily. You can also build your chatbot from scratch using the GPT-3 API directly, but this is more challenging. Develop a conversation flow. Before you start coding, you should determine the conversation flow that you want your ChatGPT to have. This involves defining the types of questions it will ask, the types of responses it will provide, and any additional functionality you want to include, such as user authentication or database integration. Train your model. Once you have defined your conversation flow, you need to train your ChatGPT. This involves feeding it a large amount of data to help it learn how to respond to different queries. You can use existing datasets, such as the Cornell Movie Dialogues corpus, or create your own dataset by scraping data from online sources. To train your model, you will use the GPT-3 API's completion endpoint, which takes in a prompt and returns a completed sentence. You can use this endpoint to generate responses to different queries, and then use those responses to train your model. Test and refine. Once you have trained your ChatGPT, you should test it by asking it different questions and evaluating its responses. You should refine your chatbot as necessary to improve its performance. This may involve adjusting your conversation flow, tweaking your training data, or changing your model hyperparameters. Deploy your ChatGPT. Once you are satisfied with your ChatGPT's performance, you can deploy it on your website or other platform. This will involve setting up a server to host your chatbot and integrating it with any necessary backend services. You can also use third-party services like Dialogflow or BotPress to deploy your chatbot more easily. Creating a ChatGPT using GPT-3 is a complex task that requires a significant amount of time and effort. It is important to carefully plan your project and allocate sufficient resources to ensure that you are able to create a chatbot that meets your needs. Additionally, you should be familiar with the basics of machine learning and natural language processing to successfully create and train your ChatGPT. To create a ChatGPT using GPT-3, you will need access to the GPT-3 API and a development environment in which you can build and test your chatbot. Here are some resources you may need. GPT-3 API. You can apply for access to the GPT-3 API on the OpenAI website. The cost of using the API varies depending on the plan you choose. The standard pricing ranges from $0.002 to $0.006 per token, with a minimum spend of $100 per month. Development environment. To build and test your chatbot, you will need a development environment that supports the programming language and chatbot framework you have chosen. Depending on your preferences, you may choose to use an IDE, integrated development environment, like Visual Studio Code or PyCharm, or a cloud-based development environment like Google Colab or Jupyter Notebook. Chatbot framework. If you choose to use a chatbot framework, you may need to pay for additional resources or services. For example, if you use Dialogflow, you may need to pay for additional conversational flow analytics or integrations with other platforms. Training data. To train your ChatGPT, you will need a large amount of data. You can use existing datasets like the Cornell Movie Dialogues corpus or scrape data from online sources. Some datasets are available for free, while others may require a fee to access. Server hosting. To deploy your ChatGPT, you will need a server to host it. You can choose to host your server on premises or use cloud-based hosting services like AWS or Azure. The cost of hosting varies depending on the hosting provider and the resources you need. The cost of creating a ChatGPT using GPT-3 can vary widely depending on your specific needs and the resources you choose to use. It's important to carefully plan your project and consider your budget before embarking on this endeavor. The amount of time it takes to create a ChatGPT using GPT-3 can vary widely depending on several factors, such as the complexity of the chatbot, the amount and quality of training data available, your level of experience with natural language processing and machine learning, and the resources you have available. Assuming you have a good understanding of natural language processing and machine learning, and you have access to sufficient resources, here is a rough estimate of how long it might take to create a ChatGPT. API access. Applying and receiving access to the GPT-3 API can take anywhere from a few days to several weeks depending on the OpenAI team's current workload. Development environment setup. Setting up your development environment should take only a few hours or a day depending on your level of experience. Choosing a chatbot framework. Choosing a framework may take a few days to evaluate and compare different options. Conversation flow design. Designing the conversation flow is a critical task, and it can take a few days to a few weeks to ensure that it meets your expectations. Training data preparation. Preparing the training data can take several weeks, especially if you need to collect and curate your own data. Training the model. Training your ChatGPT model can take anywhere from a few hours to several days or weeks, depending on the amount of training data, the complexity of the model, and the hardware resources available. Testing and refining. Testing and refining the ChatGPT is an iterative process and may take several weeks or months to ensure that it performs well. Deployment. Deploying your ChatGPT can take anywhere from a few hours to a few days, depending on the hosting provider and the complexity of the deployment. Overall, it can take several weeks to several months to create a ChatGPT using GPT-3, depending on the factors mentioned above. It's important to be patient and dedicated to the project to ensure that it meets your expectations. Thanks for tuning into Artificial Intelligent Finances. We hope you found this video informative and insightful. If you did, please give us a thumbs up and consider subscribing to our channel to stay up to date with the latest developments in AI and finance. Don't forget to leave a comment below and let us know what you think.